Please welcome the panel. Rhowch groeso cynnes i'r panel a'i cadeirydd Cefin Campbell.
Wel, prynhawn da i chi gyd, ac oedd hi'n hyfryd iawn cael yn ysbrydoli hyd yn oed o'r ochr fan'na gan araith am mawr iawn. A siarad yn bersonol, dwi'n edrych ymlaen yn fawr iawn at gydweithio a hi yn Sir Gyfyrddin ac eraill hefyd wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod gyda ni dîm da yn San Steffan. Ond beth bynnag, dyn ni yma i drafod amaeth am y 3/4 munud nesaf. A fel wedes i mewn cyfarfod ymylol prynhawn ddo, oni bai bod chi wedi bod yn byw mewn ogof, mi fyddwch chi wrth gwrs wedi sylwi ar y protestiadau diri sydd wedi bod ledlu'r Cymru gan ffermwyr sydd yn poeni am ei bywoliaeth, y poeni am ei dyfodol. Ac mae yn bwnc cwbl amserol i ni drafod yma yn y nghynhadledd, yma yn ardal Caernarfon, Gwynedd a Gosion Ynys Môn, ardaloedd sydd yn draddodiadol yn rhai amaethyddol. A dwi'n falch iawn iawn o ddweud bod cynrychiolwyr o'r ddwy undeb a hefyd Llyr Gruffydd, Lladmerydd y Blaid a'r materion gwledig gamaeth wrth gwrs ar y panel. Felly gai groesawu y panelwyr. Abi Reader yw dirprwy lywydd NFU Cymru, felly croeso Abi.
Diolch.
Lauren Price yw swyddog materion seneddol Undeb Amaethwyr Cymru, FUW, felly croeso Lauren. Ac wrth gwrs, ys angen i mi gyflwyno Llyr i chi, mae Llyr wedi bod yn bencampwr diflino ers iddo fe ailgydio yn y portffolio yn ddiweddar ac wedi bod yn lais arbennig o gry i ni wrth amddiffyn ein ffermwyr ar sector amaeth yn gyffredinol. Felly, wy'n edrych ymlaen at trafodaeth fywiog iawn. Felly, rhowch groeso iddyn nhw gyd, os gwelwch chi yna. Felly, fel dwedes i, mae yna dipyn o gynnwrf wedi bod yn y sector amaeth. Ac un o'r newidiadau mwyaf, wrth gwrs, yw bod ni wedi symud o gynllun BPS, oedd yn rhoi taliadau cyson i ffermwyr drwy'r Undeb Ewropeaidd. Fe ddeithon ni allan o Ewrop. Brexit, wrth gwrs, yn golygu bod yna gyfle i Gymru i greu cynllun amaethyddol bespoc penodol iawn i Gymru. A dyna'r dasg mae Llywodraeth Cymru wedi ei chael. Wrth gwrs, dyw'r cynllun hwnnw ddim wedi bod wrth fodd pawb. Felly, y cwestiwn amlwg i fi ofyn i chi yw, beth sydd wedi arwen at y protestiadau yma? A'r cynllun SFS sydd wedi bod yn cael ei drafod ers nifer fawr o flynyddoedd. Ond pam y protestiadau yma nawr? Beth sydd wedi digwydd i gynhyrfu ffermwyr? Abi i ddechrau.
Diolch. Right, I haven't put my translator on ear, but I'm guessing that you've asked me why are farmers protesting at the moment.
Yeah. What's kind of triggered the protest in recent months? What's been the tipping point?
Okay, so I think the key thing to point out is it's a number of different things, and really we've just seen an accumulation of everything that's just come to a head, and the tipping point has been the details that have come out with the Sustainable Farming Scheme, particularly when the consultation for the Sustainable Farming Scheme was released. It came with an impact assessment which Welsh Government had commissioned, and within that there were three headlines really. One was the potential to lose 11% of jobs directly on farms in Wales, which as we are Wales's largest employer, we calculate that would be at least 5,500 jobs, and that's just on farms. That's not within the wider food and drink sector, which employs 250,000 people in Wales. So it is Wales's largest employer right across the board. So that was number one. Also, there was going to be a potential loss of 199 million off the bottom line of farm business incomes. And there was going to be a loss of about 112,000 head of livestock, whether that would be 112,000 cows or the equivalent in sheep would be about 800,000 sheep. So it's going to cause dramatic shifts in the way the Welsh landscape looks. And I think with farmers who'd already seen cuts in budget, who are struggling with things like bovine TB, increased regulations such as for water quality. It just got way too much, and that's why we've seen the protests.
So it's an accumulation of many things coming together, and that ADAS report was probably the trigger that, you know,
Yes.
pushed farmers to think, well, we can't really go on like this. Lauren, do you want to add anything to that? Any other perspective on what the trigger points were?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it is the compounded effects of the SFS proposals that we've seen, TB, the NVZ regulations. I think as an industry we feel sometimes the regulations that are brought in aren't always following the science, and that can be very frustrating. A lot of farmers are best placed to know what's best on the land, and we don't always feel heard. So yes, I would say it's a compounded effect, and I think a lot of the protesters that we saw were of a younger generation. I'm 31, I still class myself as part of the younger generation. There's nothing really, I think there's one line in the SFS that mentions new entrants to the industry. It's an incredibly despairing time to be a young person in the industry. I had a coffee with Aled from the NFU earlier, and we discussed how many young people go to Australia and New Zealand. And a lot of my friends, everybody knows somebody that's been to Australia and New Zealand, and often they don't come back. We're losing tranches of people out of our industry because they don't see a future, and I really struggle to see a future for myself or my little boy in the industry. So it's the compounded effects of the things that we've seen that have piled up and up. It's the impact report that we saw, and it's a despair within the industry as well.
A mae'r digalondyd na wy'n credu'n brifo yn dywe hynny, os yw bobl ddim yn gweld dyfodol i'r genhedlaeth nesaf yn y sector amaethyddol, yna mae hwnna'n rhywbeth. Chymod, os i chi, mae gyda fi 4 o blant, di magu ar fferm deuluol, chymod, mae leia 2 ohonyn nhw'n gweld i gyrfau dyfodol yn y diwydiant amaeth. A'i riant, chymod, mae hwnna ddim jyst yn bolisi sy'n mynd i effeithio a wneud pethau bach yn anoddach. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth sy'n mynd i fer eich esgyrn chi'n dweud ynglyn â, chymod, hawl y genhedlaeth nesaf i fod yn cynhyrchu bwyd, i fod yn ffermio mewn modd sydd yn cyflawni, chymod, ar gyfer y cymdeithas yn ehangach drwy mynd i'r afel a newid hinsawdd a bioamrywiaeth ac yn y blaen a gymaint o bethau eraill. A fi yn credu, wrth gwrs, TB, NVZ, mae'r SFS wedi dod nawr, yr cynllun ffermio cynnladwy, mae'r ansicrwydd yna yn symud ymlaen. Dyw bobl jyst ddim yn gallu gweld llwybr, le mae nhw a'i ffarm nhw yn ffito mewn i'r weledigaeth yna. A wy'n credu bod hwnna wedi bod yn gamgymeriad strategol mawr gan y Llywodraeth. Chymod, llwn i ddadle ynglyn â strwythyr y cynllun a beth yw'r gwahanol elfennau, ond le mae'r weledigaeth fwy, chymod, does gyda ni ddim cynllun datblygu ar gyfer economi cefn gwlad yng Nghymru, does gyda ni ddim strategaeth fwyd genedlaethol sydd yn rhoi ar ddeall i bobl pam bod ni'n cynhyrchu bwyd. Chymod, siwt ydw i fel ffarm yn gallu ffito mewn i'r cynllun yma. Beth yw'r cyfraniad dwi'n dod i'r bwrdd? Mae yna vacuum llwyr ar hyn o bryd dwi'n teimlo o safbwynt polisi cenedlaethol. A wedyn pan bod yna gynlluniau wedyn yn cael ei roi ger bron, wel, dyw'r line of sight yna, pan o'n i'n rhan o'r polisi amaeth cyffredin, o'ch chi'n gwybod am 7 mlynedd bod yna faint o arian oedd ar y bwrdd. Mae'r diwydiant nawr yn mynd o flwyddyn i flwyddyn heb wybod beth sy'n dod flwyddyn nesaf. Allwch chi ddim cynllunio ar y sail yna, a dos ryfedd wedyn bod bobl yn adweithio, oherwydd dwi'n meddwl mae bobl yn ofn, achos dyn nhw ddim yn gwybod ble maen nhw'n mynd, beth mae'r Llywodraeth a chymdeithas yn ehangach yn disgwyl iddyn nhw gyflawni, a sut maen nhw'n mynd i gael eu cefnogi i wneud hynny.
I rhai falle sydd ddim yn gyfarwydd ar maes yma, mae'r cynllun ffermio cynaliadwy yn ceisio mynd i'r afel a chefnogi cynhyrchu bwyd cynaliadwy, ond hefyd ymateb i'r argyfwng newid hinsawdd hefyd. Felly, os ga i ofyn yn benodol ar y cynllun SFS, ni wedi clywed iawn am y 10% coed enghraifft, a'i hwnna yw'r bwgan mwyaf, a hwnna sydd yn poeni ffermwyr, neu os na lawer mwy iddo fe na hynny? Abi, is it just 10% trees or is it more than that?
So the 10% trees is something that the media has fixated on, and it's just been a very simple message to be able to put out for people to understand. Excuse me, clearly that is going to be behind the job losses, because obviously if you take land out of agricultural production, and agricultural production in Wales is largely livestock based, and that is a big employer, it does require a lot of people. once you take them out, take the livestock out of the equation, obviously the people will go, and there will be a significant loss in income. I mean, even if you put the income to one side, it's the value of the land. So typically, Welsh farmland will be valued anything from about £10,000 an acre, maybe up to 20, perhaps in my area, sometimes it could be as much as £30,000 an acre, whereas woodland is worth £3,000 an acre at the most at the moment. So if you have got a mortgage or a loan, various overdraft, lease hire, whatever it may be, your bank is going to have some serious concerns if you suddenly start devaluing your land to that significant degree. So the trees have definitely been a big problem, but there are a lot of other issues. And I think what farmers are feeling is increasing pressure to take on the role to deal with society's emissions, because they're the only industry that can sequester the carbon, so we can pull it out of the atmosphere and put it back into the ground. But I don't think farmers have got a clear plan on how that's going to be done, and they certainly don't have any faith that anyone is going to support them to do it. And at the moment, they are the only ones that are going to suffer financially for this, as the impact assessment has shown.
If I could just carry on with, if I ask you, Lauren, the responsibility for climate change is on all of us, but farmers manage about 90% of the land of Wales. I mean, isn't it incumbent on farmers to take that responsibility on board as part of this scheme?
Yes, it's incumbent on farmers to take our share of the responsibility. Of course it is. Nobody, not one member, not one farmer I've ever spoke to says it's not our job to play our part in the climate recovery that we all want to see. I think as an industry, we often see, and we discussed earlier, there's sometimes anger around the term net zero. As an industry, we feel like we are being shouldered with the burden of responsibility to fix the climate emergency for everybody. Climate emissions on farm, if you look at DEFRA statistics, since 1990, they have fallen year on year. As an industry, we are doing our part. I'm not saying we're doing enough. There's always more that can be done. We can all improve our practices. We can improve the way we do things. We can try new things. There will be opportunity in this new Made for Wales scheme in that we can adapt. It opens the door for new ways of doing things and innovation. So there is some anger around the fact, and we as an industry are the only industry that can sequester that carbon. Most farmers are nature-friendly farmers just by doing the things we do day in, day out. And as an industry, we are doing our bit. We want to do our part, but it does feel unfair. On a personal level, sometimes a lot of the people I speak to, it feels unfair that we are shouldered with that responsibility for the whole of society, and other industries maybe aren't held to the similar level of account.
Llyr, i chi'n cadeirio pwyllgor newid hinsawdd, ac i chi hefyd yn ladberydd Amaeth y Blaid. Hynny yw, os modd cymhwyso'r ddau beth?
Heb os nag o'n i bai, a un o'r pethau sy'n yngwylltio i ynglyn â'r drafodaeth yma yw bod na ryw ddisgwyliad bod y drafodaeth wedi ffegynnu yn llwyr, ynddo fe? Chi'n meddwl bod gyda chi ffermwyr ar un ochr sydd ddim eisiau newid, sydd ddim yn gweld bod e berthnasol i'r gwaith maen nhw'n wneud o safbwynt newid hinsawdd ac yn rhan sydd jyst eisiau cynhyrchu bwyd. Ac ar ochr arall wedyn, mae gyda chi amgylcheddwyr sydd ddim ond eisiau ailwylltio, ddim ond eisiau mynd i'r eitha arall, a dyw hwnna jyst ddim yn cynrychioli y reality mewn gwirionedd. A mae rhaid i weid, mae Mark Drakeford ei hunan wedi gwneud anghymwynas gyda'r broses yma drwy ryw fath o ensynio elfennau fel yna pan ymerw'r drafodaeth rai wythnosau nôl. Oedd na ormod o bwyntiau bysedd at ei gilydd yn digwydd o sawl cyfeiriad, a dwi'n meddwl bod hynny wedi helpu. Mi oedd y pwyllgor yn cwrdd i ddiau diwetha. Echdo, teimlo dwi'n pellach nôl na ni. Ac mi o'n i'n craffu ar yr cynllun ffermio Cynaliadwy. A mi oedd na banel o gyrff amgylcheddol, mi oedd na banel cynrychiolwyr yr Undeb Amaeth a ffermwyr tenant ac yn y blaen, banel o academyddion hefyd. A beth oedd hi'n gwbl glir oedd, mae strwythyr y cynllun fel ag y mae yn eitha derbyniol i bawb. Hynny yw, mae yna elfennau felly penodol, a ewn i fewn i hynny wedyn o bosib ynglyn â beth sydd angen i newid. Ond mae yna jyst gymaint o dir cyffredin. Does neb yn fwy ungol ymwybodol na ffermwyr o beth yw effaith newid hinsawdd. Ffermwyr yw'r cyntaf i sylwi pan bod y tymhorau mynd yn dybycach i'w gilydd o hyd, pan bod yna ddigwyddiadau tywydd eithafol, nhw sydd yn nanedd y storm yna yn amlach na pheidio. Mae gallu cynhyrchu bwyd mewn modd cynaladwy gymaint o fydd i'r diwydiant yn economaidd ac yw o safbwynt cael bydd amgylcheddol. Maen nhw'n mynd law yn llaw. A wedyn mae yn anffodus bod yna rhyw, beth yw'r gair, presumption yn Saesneg, bod y ddau beth just yn mynd ben a'i gilydd. Dyw hynny ddim yn wir. A dwi'n ofni mae ffactorau ymarferol sydd wedi mynd â ni o safbwynt y cynnig yr SFS ar hyn o bryd. Mae yna ormod o universal actions, dyw'r incentive ddim yn ddigonol ac yn y blaen, ddawn ni at hynny felly wedyn. Ond mae yna dir cyffredin a mae rhaid i bawb gofio hynny, yn lle jyst meddwl bod yna ddwy garfan sydd byth yn mynd i gwrdd yn y canol.
Yn ddiddorol iawn, wrth gwrs, diwrnod yn ôl fe gyhoeddodd Fawn Gethin i gabinet newydd, a mae yna weinidog newydd wedi cael ei benodi Hewyrant Davies i fod yn ddiddorol iawn, portffolio chydig bach yn wahanol, sydd yn cyprysu amaeth gyda newid hinsawdd. Felly o bosibl, welwn ni mwy o gitgord mewn gwirionedd o gwmpas y thema'n hytrach na bod y pegynnu yn digwydd. Felly, cwestiwn i'r panel te, beth fyddech chi'n gofyn i Hewyrant Davies i wneud yn ystod i wythnos gyntaf yn ei swydd o safbwynt gofynion y sector amaeth? Lauren, start with you on this one. What would you ask the minister to do? Well, are they called cabinet secretaries
yes.
these days? Yeah.
Oh, it's probably quite a long list, so I won't hold you up too long. We need real co-design with the industry. We need somebody to listen. I'm relatively new to the union, but I know that as an industry, we've been on this journey for quite a long time now. We've had consultation after consultation, and yet it doesn't feel like we've been listened to. So my main plea to Hugh would be listen to the industry, listen to the expertise that are in every room with every farmer every time we speak to them, and we need to see real co-design here with the people who know the land and know how to get the best out of it to get to where we all want to be with climate recovery.
Okay, so more of a listener, yes? Is probably the main point you were making there. Yeah. Abby, anything to add? What would you tell?
Yeah, so yesterday I was out in Northern Ireland. So we meet regularly to compare with Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, to make sure that we sort of understand the different challenges and ambitions that we've got. And I was listening to the ministerial equivalent over there. So Andrew Muir, who is the Climate Change and Rural Affairs Minister in Northern Ireland, and his line was, he does not want to see a situation where the environment and food production are mutually exclusive, because actually they work together. And he said it's totally wrong that we're using that. And I think that's something key. And I also would just touch back on, Claire's mentioned the food strategy. We really, really need to sort out a food strategy. We need to make sure that if there's investment going into food processing, there is the production there to underpin it. We need to make sure that if we've got fantastic initiatives like the free school meals, which are brilliant, we need to make sure that the whole supply chain is aligned to actually be able to deliver that, and so that rural communities can maximise on it by supplying into it and making sure that it's sort of growing that local economy. And then there's another side of it, which is making sure that farming businesses are going to be fit for dealing with continued drought and flooding. The last time my farm had a normal production year was 2018. Since then, it has been totally skewed. And producing milk and meat off my farm has been really complicated. And I think we're going to have to start building businesses to make sure they can cope with that. We can't wait for them to try and react. We need to make sure that we take everybody along and get them all in the right place now, because drought, flooding, disease, midges coming across from France bringing various disease. This is only going to increase. We need to start now. So that all comes into this food strategy.
Okay, clear. Fel gwleidydd, hynny yw, mi fydd di'n cael cyfarfod gyda Hewyrant Davies yn fuan iawn ar ôl y Pasg. Hynny yw, restr siopa di, beth fydd ar dop y restr?
Wel, y neges gyntaf yw, ni wedi clywed fan hyn pa mor bwysig yw i bod Llywodraeth angen iddyn nhw rando a bod rhaid cyd greu neu cyd datblygu rhaglenni yma. Wrth gwrs, mae Lesley Griffiths yn gweithio ni bod nhw wedi bod yn trafod hwn ers 7 mlynedd. So be ni wedi bod yn neud ers 7 mlynedd, os ni'n cyrraedd pwynt lle mae ffermwyr ar steps y Senedd yn protestio, diwna ddim yn swnio fel gwrando a co-design i fi. Ond mae rhaid i fi weid, falle bod e'n bethodi weid mewn cynhadledd Plaid Cymru, ond o'n i'n falch i weld Hewyrant Davies yn cael ei benodi. i'r portfolio. Dwi yn meddwl bod e'n berson pragmatic, eitha hirben, adeiladol. Falle fyddai'n gweud stori arall gynadledd yr hydre, felly gawn ni weld. Ond dwi yn credu mae'n gyfle i'r Llywodraeth gymeriad cam yn ôl, edrych tyma bach yn fwy gwrthrychol ar yr hyn sydd ar y bwrdd, deall felly o bersbectif ffres y gofidiau sydd gan bobl, a bod yn ddigon dewr i newid pethau. Mi oedd Lesley Griffiths a Mark Drakeford a buddsoddiad sylweddol yn y cynllun ffermio Cynaliadwy, gwerth 7 mlynedd o drafod a chynllunio. Yn wleidyddol, i wastad yn anodd iddyn nhw, dwi'n meddwl, i ddweud, chi'n fe, ni wedi bod yn anghywir all along. Oedd e anebygol o ddigwydd yn oedd e. Mae yna dalen lan nawr, a wi yn credu bod yn rhaid y neges gyntaf gan y gweinidog newydd, neu'r ysgrifennydd cabinet newydd, fydd, mae'r rhaid i ni ail asesu, mae'r rhaid i gael rhyw fath o reset fan hyn. Mae angen reset yn y berthynas rhwng y Llywodraeth a'n cymunedau cefn gwlad ni, felly wedwn ni fel yna. A dwi'n meddwl bydde fe'n signal positif cynnar, i ni'n mynd i ail edrych ar hwn. Fel dwi'n gweud, mi ddoth hi'n glir o'r craffu ni wedi wneud, yn gyffredinol, dyw architecture yr cynllun ddim yn ffeiledig, ond mae rhai o'r manylion wy'n credu yn gwbl ffeiledig, a'r prif un o'r rheini wrth gwrs, yw'r dynesiad one size fits all yma sydd yn perthyn. 10% o goed, boed chi'n fferm lath, ar lawr y dyffryn, neu bod chi'n fferm ddefed fyny yn yr ucheldiroedd. Dyn nhw ddim yn mynd i allu bod yn ffarmio yn yr un cyd-destun, dyn nhw ddim yn mynd i allu dilifro yn yr un ffordd, ond eto mae'r polisi yr un peth i bawb. A mae'r rhaid i ni gael rhywbeth tipyn mwy soffistigedig, tipyn mwy dynamic, rhywbeth sydd tipyn mwy bespoc i amgylchiadau pob ffarm. Nawr mae hynny'n anodd, dyw hynny ddim heb i heriau, ond yna'r unig ffordd wy'n credu mae modd i ni symud ymlaen yn ystyrlon.
Just i ddilyn hwnna, my final question on the SFS, and if we can keep it brief, because I want a discussion on TB and NBZs, if we can fit it all in the time we have. If we were to just focus on, shall we say, 3 key points each from the current SFS scheme as it stands, what would you like to change? What would you like to see radically being changed in that consultation document moving forward? So, I don't know. Abby, you go first. Go on.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the key thing is the universal layer. So in order for the farmer to be able to access the scheme, they have to get onto the universal layer. So universal genuinely has to mean universal. That means that whether you're a tenant, whether you farm common land, whether you farm with your parents, or whether you farm as part of a bigger business, you need to be able to get onto that scheme. And that means you've got to make it a lot simpler. Some of these requirements are just far too difficult. So I think it's really just about changing access. I think, so that would be number 1. Number 2, try and take out some of these more patronising areas, such as continuous professional development. I mean, imagine telling that to a 58-year-old or 59-year-old farmer who's been farming since he was that big, that he needs to go on a shearing course or something. And again, by a government that potentially doesn't really have much experience in designing a CPD course for a farmer. Mm-hmm. So, that definitely needs to come out. 2 points. And third one, maybe triple SIs, they're not included. Why not?
Okay. Lauren, your 3?
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate the point about accessibility for all. I mean, our farm and my neighbour's farm, they're very different, even though we're neighbours. So we need to see something far more bespoke per type of farm, or even, further down per farm, if possible. The payment methodology, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there to make this scheme make people want to join, make people able to join. We need to see that baseline support for the industry. The food support, the support system, the farm support system is a food subsidy. It's there to keep the price of food down for the public. If that's lost at the grassroots level of farming, then the government may find that they have to subsidise food further in the supply chain. So we need to see that the accessibility, we need to see the payment methodology, and again, something for young entrants. It's something I'm very passionate about. We need to see something to help the younger people. The average age of farmers in this country is 65. You know, that's retirement age for many people in many industries. We need to see that brought down. We want young blood, we want new ideas, we want new people in this industry, and new ideas to get us to where we all want to be.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, clear.
A reduced number of universal actions, because there are 17 universal actions that you have to meet, each and every one where applicable. That's too long a shopping list. Many farmers were telling me when they went to the road shows and the government were running through the list, by the time they got to 6 or 7, most of them already decided, I'm not going into the scheme. So I think that needs to be rationalised. I think the payment incentive doesn't work. The costs incurred income foregone model doesn't provide sufficient attractiveness to farmers to go into the scheme. And the final one, I was on a roll there and the clapping put me off. Oh dear. Or the tree cover, the 10% figure is now toxic, as much as we, wouldn't want it to be. But the way around that, I think, is there has to be a more dynamic approach that recognises the particular circumstances of each farm whilst encouraging greater growth of trees. So those are the three for me.
Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi am y drafodaeth yna. Dwi am symud ymlaen I trafod pwnc llosg arall yn y sector. Ac mae'r diciau TB wedi bod yn brofiad torcalonus I gyment o ffermwyr dros gyment o blynyddoedd. Ac I ni wedi gweld rhaglen ffermio yn ddiweddar yn dangos difa gwartheg ar fiarth y ffarm o flaen y ffermwr a'i deulu ac effaith emosiynol hynny, effaith iechyd meddwl yn ogystal. Ac I ni'n gwybod beth yw safbwynt y blaid lafur dyn nhw ddim eisiau cynnwys anifeiliaid gwyllt fel rhan o'r datrysiad yna. Felly gai ofyn dechrau gyda llir y tro yma o ran polisi Plaid Cymru. Ble dyn ni'n yn gallu mynd gyda llafur mor ystyfnig ynglyn â peidio cynnwys anifeiliaid gwyllt yn y broses o geisio mynd i'r afel ar broblem. Ble allwn ni fynd fel Plaid? Beth yw'n safbwynt ni?
Wel, allwn ni drio newid llywodraeth. Wrth gwrs, mae hwnna'n un ateb yn dweud. Ac mae'r dystiolaeth yn dangos bod enghraifft Ifa Mwchder yn greu gwahaniaeth. Mae'n greu gwahaniaeth I ni wedi gweld yn Lloegr, lefelau gostwng 2 ran o dair yn Gloucestershire, treian yn Somerset, a hynny ar ôl 4 mlynedd o ddifa. Mae adroddiad APHA newydd gael ei gyhoeddi nawr peer reviewed yn dangos ar y cyfan a draws 52 safle'n Lloegr bod yna ostyngiad o 56% wedi bod mewn achosion o TB lle mae yna ddifa yn digwydd. A mae'n rhaid I byd o'n meddwl bod hwnna'n ddifa pob mochyn deiar. Mae wedi cael ei dargedu, mae'n cael ei wneud mewn modd cyfrifol. 10 mlynedd yn ôl, o'n i'n difar i'w 6,000 a hanner o wartheg yng Nghymru bob blwyddyn, erbyn hyn mae'n 10,000 a hanner. O bob 1,000 nôl yn 2013 o reactors oedd na, oedd 3 a hanner ohonyn nhw yn cael ei difa, o bob 1,000 o wartheg oedd 3 a hanner o reactors. Erbyn hyn mae'n 5. Felly, dim os beth mae'r llywodraeth yn gweud o ran spin bod nifer y buchesu ar ei lawr ac yn y blaen, dyw hynny ddim yn wir. Mae 16% o ffermwyr llaeth Cymru dan glo nawr oherwydd TB. Yn ardal risg uchel y gorllewin mae'n 26%. Mae hwnna'n sylweddol, yn dweud? Mae hwnna, a mae'n dod â chost sylweddol. Yn credu mae'r undebau sydd wedi amlygu bod ar gyfartaledd yn rhyw 5,020 o bunnau per ffarm sy'n mynd lawr y flwyddyn o gostau ychwanegol. Siwt allwch chi oroesi y sefyllfa yna. Felly, mae rhaid I ddifa fod yn rhan o'r ateb. Dyw e ddim yn silver bullet. Does neb yn gweud mae hwnna yw yr ateb, ond mae'n gorau bod yn rhan o becyn cynhwysfawr. Ond, wrth gwrs, tra bod y llywodraeth presennol yn gwrthod mynd i'r cyfeiriad yna, yna mae rhaid sicrhau bod y rheolau fel maen nhw yn gweithio'n well ac yn rhai sydd yn digwydd mewn ffordd sydd ddim yn achosi y loes a'r boen ychwanegol diangen yna. Mae difa ar y fferm, fel welon ni ar ffermio, fel o ti'n gweud, yn rhywbeth gallai'r llywodraeth roi stop arno fe nawr. Maen nhw wedi creu grŵp technegol I gynghori, ac wrth gwrs mae yna broses iawn sydd angen mynd drwyddo fe, ond pam bod I wedi cymryd tan nawr. Mae yna siarad am hyn wedi bod ers sbel fawr, a mae'n warth o beth bod ni dal yn y sefyllfa yna, lle fel wedodd Wyn o Capel Isac ar raglen ffermio, y cwbl wy'n neud nawr yw magu fferm mwyn I difa nhw ar y biarth. Y cwbl dwi'n neud nawr yw magu gwartheg mwyn I difan ar y buath. Pa fath o fywoliaeth yw hwnna? DPJ wedi dangos bod 70% o referrals wedi bod at wasanaethau iechyd meddwl. O referrals, ddim o bobl yn cysylltu â nhw, sydd I fi yn dangos, un teulu oedd y teulu na'n Capel Isac. Mae yna ganodd o deuluol ym mhob cornel o Gymru yn mynd trwy'r un profiad ar hyn o bryd. A i'r Llywodraeth wrthod un o'r ffyrdd mwyaf effeithiol sydd wedi cael ei ddangos mewn gwledydd eraill ar draws y byd I daclo'r broblem yn ei hanfod, iddyn nhw wrthod hynny, dwi'n meddwl mae hynny'n warth o beth.
So let's have the views of the two unions on how would you tackle TB if you were the minister. What would you do?
Well, I think, Llyr's covered the wildlife aspect very well, so I'm going to park that for a minute because I do appreciate that it can get quite toxic. There are a number of things the Welsh Government can do immediately that will cost no money and could make life a lot better. One would be dealing with the slaughter of cows in calf on farm. So my farm was shut down with TB for 4 years and 11 months. We went clear in February. My very first experience of TB was cow number 1956, who was going to be removed as a removed as a reactor. We had to separate her immediately, so I put her out in a field on her own, watched her for 8 days. Well, as a herd animal, she cried for the rest of her animals, for the rest of her herd, because she was no longer with them. Then we waited for someone to come and shoot her, because unfortunately she was too heavy in calf to be able to travel. As a farmer, when you put an animal down on farm, it's usually because they're sick. So they are unwell, they probably can't stand, or if they can, they're not going to move around much. A vet will come out, inject them, they're put to sleep. As an animal that goes as a TB reactor, this is a live, fit, healthy cow that wants to live. We have no facilities on farms to be able to shoot these animals properly. I can remember pinning her between 2 gates while I waited for the guy with the gun to go around to the front of her head to try and line up in the sights between her eyes exactly where he was going to have to shoot her. I can remember watching her reach out towards that gun, because cows are very, very nosy animals. She reached out towards that gun to sniff the end of it, because she was just so curious. And I stood there thinking, I need to do everything to stop this. And I had to stand back and watch. Once he shot her, she dropped to the ground. She thrashed so much, because I don't know if you've seen anything when it's shot, but the muscles go into a spasm. She thrashed about so much, she unhinged 2 gates, one of which got wrapped around her legs and was completely trashed, a complete galvanized gate. Blood everywhere. I then had to sign the paperwork for her to go off. I had to watch while somebody hoisted her up a ramp onto a pile of other dead cows that had come from another TB farm, and then I had to go and clean up the blood. So I am very, very bitter about why this cannot be solved. Farmers deserve respect. We are human beings, and this needs to be sorted ASAP. We need to stop the suicides. We need to stop the depression. We need to stop the calls to the helpline. We need to start treating these farmers like they're real people.
Yeah.
Chi'n modd, i ni'n gallu gweld yr emosiwn yn glir fan hyn. A rhyw bythefnos yn ôl, da ni siarad â Wyn ar ffarm Castell Hywel oedd ar rhaglen ffermio. Ac oedd e'n dweud wrtho I, bob dydd, bob awr o bob dydd, mae e'n meddwl, mae darluniau o weld I wartheg yn cael ei seithi un ar ôl y llall yn dod nôl iddo fe, yn union fel mae Abi wedi esbonio I ni. Allwn ni ddim a gadael I hynny I barhau. Lauren?
I think, it's a harrowing experience for everybody that is, that is subjected to this. It's awful. It's very important as well to, you say about treating the farmers with respect. We also need, I feel like that is the least respectful way for that poor cow to have ended her life. You know, as farmers, sometimes we're portrayed as evil people who don't care about our animals. It couldn't be further from the truth. We love each and every one of them. We raise them with love, we raise them with care, and we raise them with respect. And when you hear an awful story like that, where she didn't get the respect she deserved, when, you know, in such an awful situation, it's just heartbreaking. So I think we need a holistic approach. We've touched on the animal side of it. You know, we need to remember that the wildlife that suffers with TB, they also suffer a great deal. You know, TB is not something fun to have. We've talked to people who've worked on badger culls, and they say that when you have a badger with TB, you can hear them before you get to them, because the breathing is so laboured. It's, you know, the wildlife is suffering here. We cull just shy of 10,000 cattle a year in Wales for TB, and the wildlife is suffering out there as well. So it's nonsensical to me that we can be seeing farmers in these situations, that we're losing livestock often for no reason, because when the tests come back, they were clear of TB. So we need research, we need innovation into better testing for TB to know guaranteed this cow has TB, and unfortunately they're going to have to, you know, we're going to have to deal with that. We have to tackle it in the wildlife for the sake of the wildlife, for a healthy wildlife population, but also, you know, TB numbers in Wales are going up all the time, even though we've had the strictest movement for over a decade. So clearly it's not the answer, and we need to do something differently.
A wy'n credu bod yr effaith dynol hefyd, yr effaith emosiynol mae hyn yn cael ar ffermwyr, dwi fel llir fi'n siŵr a nifer o'r aelodau eraill o'r Senedd, yn cael ebyst gan ffermwyr 3-4 o'r gloch yn y bore. Yn amlwg, methu cysgu, methu delio gyda straen hyn i gyd, yn ymbil arno ni fel gwleidyddion i wneud rhywbeth ynghylch TB. Felly mae effaith iechyd meddwl enfawr ar ffermwyr oherwydd hyn. Ydy hyn yn rhywbeth mae'r ddwy undeb wedi gweld, o ti yn sôn am y cynnydd DPJ, sef corff sy'n cefnogi iechyd meddwl ymwneud y sector amaeth, wedi gweld 70% o gynnydd. I chi fel dwy undeb hefyd wedi gweld mwy o bobl yn dod ato chi gyda problemau iechyd meddwl oherwydd TB, oherwydd cynllun SFS a popeth arall sy'n digwydd? Abi?
Yes, I mean, obviously the mental health charities have seen an increase in calls. We've definitely noticed over the past 18 months that a lot more farmers are talking about bovine TB, and the statistics that were released earlier this week by DEFRA, which show that in certain areas of Wales, not all, but in certain areas, and I'll pick out Pembrokeshire, TB has increased there by 78% in the last 12 months. If we come up to North Wales, over in the northeast side of the country, it's increased there by 48%. So what are we doing? Because this is not working. And again, fine if we don't want to have the wildlife debate, and at some point we are going to have it, but if you just park that for a minute, there are still things that can be done in policy that will cost no money and will make lives better and will help with control of TB. And we could at the very least start with them. And then, you know, we are at some point going to have to look at a wildlife debate. Coming along the A55, I passed 9 dead badgers today. I don't see that in my area. I'm from the Vale of Glamorgan. So there are certain areas where we are going to have to deal with this.
Okay. Lauren, do you want to talk about the mental health aspect?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a marked increase when we speak to the DPJ, and I sometimes think that vast 70% increase that we've discussed is the compounded effect of the TB, NVZ, SFS. You know, the analogy that they give is that people are like a sponge. You can only take so much, and then the SFS and the impact assessment that we saw was you know, it's the final straw. People can't cope anymore, and there's no other industry in Wales where that would be considered acceptable. So I think it's a real worry that the Welsh Government haven't taken this seriously, even just from that one perspective. We don't feel like that it's been taken seriously. It wouldn't be accepted anywhere else.
Okay. Mae gyda ni chydig funudau ar ôl. Dwi eisiau cyffwrdd yn sydyn iawn ar lygredd amaethyddol, llygredd afonydd. Mae Plaid Cymru wedi chwarae rôl bwysig iawn o ran newid sabwynt o bosibl Llywodraeth Cymru ar y rheoliadau NBZ, so nhw fod i ddechrau blwyddyn i mis Ionawr diwetha ar draws Cymru gyfan. Fe lwyddon ni fel rhan o'r cytundeb cydweithio i arafu'r broses yna, a wedyn deithbwyd â system trwyddedu mewn. Mae hynny wedi cael ei newid eto nawr lle mae yna ymchwil yn cael ei wneud ar fesurau amgen. Felly mae'r Blaid yn uniongyrchol wedi dylanwadu ar arafu dyfodiad y rheoliadau yna. Ond i ni hefyd wedi gweld afonydd sydd wedi cael ei effeithio gan lygredd amaethyddol, llygredd gan Dŵr Cymru hefyd wrth gwrs, a diwydiannau eraill. Ond just un cwestiwn yr un i chi, just i gloi. Be ydych chi'n meddwl yw'r ateb i atal llygredd amaethyddol? Petai ni ddim yn edrych ar yr NBZs fel opsiwn beth arall? Beth all ffermwyr i wneud mwy i arbed y llygredd yma rhag digwydd?
Well, there's so many things to say on it, so I'll just sort of pick a couple of highlights. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to yourself, to Plaid Cymru, for the support that you've given us over this, because it has been really difficult, and we've been so grateful that you have supported us as you have. I think what I really want to see is Welsh Government take notice of NRW, their environmental body, who said that we needed to increase NVZ areas from roughly 2% to 8%, and somehow we've ended up with 100%. And they need to move away from this almost Mickey Mouse idea that by putting in regulation, magically everybody's going to be able to do what they want us to do, especially when we're looking at an impact assessment for a new sustainable farming scheme that's going to take 199 million off the bottom line of farming. So where on earth are we going to be able to get the money to invest in what they're asking us to do? If we'd been in the closed spreading period this winter, when we've seen a 258% increase in rainfall over this winter, every single farmer in Wales would have failed before the end of November. Okay, we're just... You could put all the regulation in that you like, and everybody's got the will to do what needs to be done. But physically and economically, I'm really not sure that we've grasped how impossible this task is. So let's deal with the 8% and put everything into that. And there's a missing 20 million out there somewhere that's been promised by the Welsh Government that needs to come into action. And let's remember that in Ireland, they had 300 million to deal with this, and that was Northern Ireland, 300 million about 13 years ago, and we've had zip.
Yeah, okay. Lauren, I'll finish off with Llyr.
Yeah, I'll just go back to what I said earlier about we need to follow the science here. The NRW advised 8%. We've ended up with 100%. NRW are doing some very good work on farm with riparian corridors, and a lot of the river restoration project that they're doing is working with farmers. So that's a collaboration that we need to see, but we need to follow the science and we need to follow the innovation as well. I know there are universities in Wales that have produced an app that farmers can use as an alternative to the closed periods, where you can follow the weather. As we've discussed, the seasons are all out of whack, and farmers feel that most acutely. So we need to follow the science and we need to follow the innovation, and we need to be smarter about this. And we need the government to listen.
Okay. Fel iawn,
wel, mae'n bwysig pwysleisio, does neb yn gwadu bod yna broblem. Mae rhai delio gyda'r broblem. Mae'n broblem waith mewn rhai llefydd nag eraill, ac felly eto i ni nôl i'r business one size fits all yma. Mae angen approach llawer mwy dynamic. Mae angen defnyddio technoleg modern. Mae llefydd fel Coleg Elli Aur yn arloesi yn y maes yma. Mae yna ddilliau, mae Priwex yn gwmni sydd yn darparu deunydd felly sy'n gallu mynd i'r afel a lot o hyn cyn bod e'n dod yn broblem. Felly mae yna atebion allan yna, a dwi'n gwybod am unrhyw lywodraeth arall yn y byd sy'n gweud wrth y ffermwyr, os ych chi eisiau gwybod os ydy'r tywydd yn addas ar gyfer chwalu tail, drychwch ar y calendar. Pidwch edrych trwy ffenest, drychwch ar y calendar. Na chi'r esiampl o pa mor gyntefig yw'r approach. Hynny yw, felly bod e'n siwtio yr accountants felly a'r gweithio'n sifil pan mae'n dod i allu mesu'r pethau, ond dyw bywyd, dyw natur, dyw Amaeth ddim yn gweithio ar y sail yna, ac felly bod yn lawer mwy hyglyd yw'r ateb.
Wel, diolch yn fawr iawn. Mae'r golau coch yn fflachio sy'n golygu bod rhaid i fi ddod ar sesiwn yma i ben. Wy'n siŵr bod chi gyd yn cytuno bod ni wedi cael sesiwn hynod o ddifyr a sylwadau cwbl ddiffiant gan y tri ar y panel. Felly, wy'n siŵr ar eich rhan chi gyd fyddech chi am i mi ddiolch i Abi, Lauren a Llyr Hughes Griffith.